Goddess preserve me, sighed Captain Tanari as she attempted to navigate through her home while her children rampaged around, their carer in pursuit. I can hire additional help if you can't handle this rebel, Mikkel, she stated, trying to ensure she was heard over the sound of cheerful screaming. No, it's fine, Miss T. I'll get these two troublemakers bathed eventually, just gotta tire them out. And that's the trick to all kids, gotta outlast them, replied her alien clanmate cheerfully, as he continued chasing the cubs, who seemed to be having the time of their lives. She smiled at him, as he finally managed to catch the younger of the two, then realized his predicament and frowned slightly at the prospect of catching the more energetic child with one arm, while the other tried to squirm out of his grasp. Confident the task of bringing the two down for the night was well in hand, she returned to other matters. Between rebellious nobles, rival clans, an infestation of bandits, God knows what else, and her pregnancy, she had been stretched to her limit trying to control it all. The face must have been smiling upon her when they led her to a small, hairless ape that would become her close friend and the carer of her children. Some questioned the wisdom of letting an alien take care of her young. Many wondered if the cubs were safe in his hands, but they didn't see what she saw in him, a kind soul in a harmless body. Ever since that first day she heard her wailing cub suddenly fall silent and walked in on Mikkel cradling the child in his arms, softly whispering some song from his world, I knew what kind of person he was. He had come a long way from the bloody, battered child she met a year ago, huddled in the corner of the keep some rogue mage used as his base to perform his outlawed magic. She had expected mild resistance in storming the dilapidated ruins, but what few bandits were left alive had long since fled into the woods to escape the beast that had torn through their comrades, leaving only a pile of disfigured bodies and a lone alien cowering in the corner. It was clear the mage had performed his spells and accidentally summoned some entity that wasn't all too happy with being plucked from his home, which is exactly why such magic was outlawed. She had received reports of a group of disgruntled nobles and bandit leaders meeting in an abandoned village several miles from her home city. The common thorn in their side was Captain Tanari and her policy of both not accepting bribes, as well as her irritatingly diligent approach to crime prevention. Seeing an opportunity to both finally crush the dissenters, as well as impress the clan leaders enough to get her that promotion, she gathered her party of warriors above reproach and set off. The journey took her a good few hours, and she arrived as the day drew to a close, and she knew her future prisoners would be too drunk after their scheming to put up a real fight. Entering the tavern expecting to meet and greet several inebriated criminals, she was instead taken aback by the sight of one of her spies' heads nailed to a post by the far wall, badly beaten, but recognizable, with a note pinned to his forehead that read, "If you value your family, play by our rules." She froze in place, unable to speak, move or think, her training abandoning her entirely. All she could think about was getting home. She barked orders to her men, and they all rode hard back to the city, pushing their mounts to their limits. Finally, after what felt like eternity, they arrived home in the dead of night and barely gave the guards at the gate time to recognize who she was as they sprinted to her home. As she and her men approached, she could see a swarm of clan warriors surrounding the home who parted to allow her and her entourage to pass. Her mother, one of the 4 clan leaders, exited the building and approached her with both of the captain's cubs in her arms. She could barely control herself and was leaping at the woman to get a hold of her terrified children, tears in her eyes. "Oh, Goddess! Are you all right? Are you hurt? It's okay, I'm here now." As she gripped her children tight to her chest, her mother put a hand on her shoulder reassuringly. "It's fine. The perpetrators are dead or fled the scene." Tanari's demeanor changed from panic to confusion. "But how did you know to come here? I only found out at the planned meeting point." "I didn't. We were getting ready to rest when we heard shouting coming from your home. We raced over to find... Well, you should see for yourself." She stepped aside, making way for Tanari to enter her home. As she crept through her home, she was taken aback by the carnage. This wasn't a normal battle. This was a wild brawl, she thought, examining the dead bandits with their skulls caved in, their arms and legs broken at angles that made her wince. Some had pieces of pottery jammed into their eyes and throats. Observing the carnage, she realized who she hadn't yet seen. "Mikkel!" she yelled, racing towards her children's room. Almost diving into the door, she had expected to see her clanmate with his throat slit in a pool of his own blood. She had not expected to see him sitting perfectly still, huddled in the corner with a town healer trying to tend to his dizzying array of wounds. His eyes were all but glued shut from the blood which poured out of his now closed head wound. His chest and arms were clearly slashed repeatedly with various bladed weapons or claws. Worst of all, his hands were a mess, mangled at unnatural angles with bone jutting out. She leapt to his side and crouched down to get a better look at him, the panic still clear in her voice. "Mikhail, are you all right? Please, tell me what happened." He simply stared straight ahead at the wall, oblivious to the world. She turned to the healer with pleading desperation in her eyes. "Will he be well? Can you heal him?" The aged healer, unfazed by her tone, simply nodded. Mikhail, still perfectly still, turned his head to face Tanari and smiled gently. "Hey, Mrs. T. Didn't see you there. Sorry for causing a mess. I'll get this cleaned up." She shivered at the sight of her friend gazing straight through her, as if into her soul. No, it's fine. You just sit there and let Shana take care of you." She took a moment to gently stroke his hair. She considered asking what had happened, but it wasn't the right time. Besides, it was obvious. They wanted to take the kids, Miss T. Couldn't just let that happen. He rested his head on her shoulder and began to gently weep.